Will institutions cling to brittle systems forged in abundance, or will they reforge their enrollment practices with this new heat? Welcome to the Innovation Forge. In today's episode, we visit Adaptive Enrollment Management through the Forge Bellows. Let's see how innovation meets artistry as we forge something extraordinary together.
You are listening to the Innovation Forge, the #1 podcast on adaptive enrollment management, exploring the data, marketing, and strategy that fuels higher education. Here's your host, David Dysart.
Hello, Guilders, and welcome to another episode of the Innovation Forge. I am your host, David Dysart, and I'm thrilled you're joining me on this journey into the innovative world of higher education and adaptive enrollment management. Chapter 1, The Fire is Lit, Foundations of Adaptive Enrollment. Codex Guide, The Metallurgist, Refiner of Insight and Catalyst for Decision-Making. Every forge begins with ignition. Not the first strike, but the first heat. The moment the coals catch and the air shifts. That's where we begin the Forge Bellows, with the kindling of adaptive enrollment management, and the recognition that the climate has already changed. Many institutions talk about approaching the enrollment cliff. But if you listen closely, you can hear the gravel already slipping underfoot. Demographics have constricted. Student behavior has fractured. Legacy marketing methods lie brittle and fractured on the shop floor. What used to work no longer does, and what needs to be built can't be summoned from old templates. Chapter 1 gathers 5 early sparks, perspectives that expose the volatile furnace higher ed now operates within. These entries are not about panic. They are about precision. They argue that student-centricity is no longer a mission statement, but a survival strategy. That authenticity and agility in marketing aren't perks. They're preconditions. That portfolio bloat, global stagnation, and financial ambiguity are fractures in the blade, not cosmetic blemishes. The authors we engage here each strike at a different pressure point, but together they illuminate one truth. You cannot unburn what is already changed. Enrollment strategy must move from seasonal planning to adaptive craftsmanship, from isolated marketing campaigns to shared operational systems, from outdated assumptions to real-time behavioral response. The work ahead will require more than tinkering. We must smelt down the unusable parts of our models and pour new molds, one that reflects modern student demand, market volatility, institutional mission, and the tools now at our disposal. The slate writes, datamancers, and threadweavers among us are not simply managing processes. They're shaping a new material altogether. The fire is lit, not just metaphorically, but operationally, across admissions, marketing, financial aid, academic planning, and institutional design. The pressure is rising. But heat in the hands of a focused artisan is not the enemy. It's the condition for creation. The question is, will institutions cling to brittle systems forged in abundance, or will they reforge their enrollment practices with this new heat? This chapter is where we raise the temperature, where we examine the shape of the crisis and glimpse the opportunity embedded within it. Because every enrollment team has a choice. Stand beside the fire in hope, or step into it and forge. The hammers are ready. Let's begin. The fire is lit, forging resilience at the cliff's edge. Title, Cliffhanger, Surviving the Higher Education Enrollment Crisis. Publisher, no longer available. Forge Smith's note. As I go to publish this chapter, the link is no longer active. When I Google it, I get results from the publisher with previews that mention the article, but it appears the website has been updated. A wonderful first step in this journey together, I know. I will remove the publisher's name as they seem to have removed their articles from their site. The insight is still valuable to open the Forge Bellows. When you see me at a conference, ask me who the publisher was, and I'll tell you. I don't think I'll be forgetting it anytime soon. Without further ado, let's fire up the forge. Inside every forge, there's a moment where the raw metal glows, malleable yet fragile. The same can be said about enrollment strategy. Cliffhanger, Surviving the Higher Education Enrollment Crisis, identifies the glowing crucible that enrollment leaders are now confronting. The enrollment cliff is no longer theoretical. Declining birth rates, projected to reduce high school graduates by as much as 15% in key regions over the next decade, have collided with affordability headwinds and student skepticism about the return on a degree. As the article notes, many institutions are no longer approaching the edge. They are balancing on it. Where the analysis sharpens is in its call for student-centric craftsmanship. The old mass market enrollment bellows are sputtering. We once pumped names into large CRM furnaces, blasted out static campaigns, and hoped the molten inquiries would cool into deposits. But the ore has changed. Today's prospective students expect authentic engagement, financial clarity, and pathways that promise both belonging and postgraduate stability. The piece wisely calls out for that affordability must be reframed. This isn't solely about higher discount rates or merit packages. It's about forging value narratives. It's connecting academic offerings, career outcomes, and total cost into a transparent alloy that withstands scrutiny from students and families. Pricing without purpose simply feeds the fire without shaping the blade. One area where the article could press the hammer deeper is on operational agility. Adaptive Enrollment Management system doesn't rely on annual tweaks, but it builds signal-to-action pipelines that respond dynamically as melt indicators shift, campus visit behavior softens, or financial aid files remain incomplete. The signal craft here is not in producing more noise, but in engineering pipelines that flex without cracking. In the Forge Bellows framework, this article serves as the first heating pass, raising awareness of the pressures while pointing toward more precise metallurgical work ahead. Enrollment leaders must recognize that the fire, but also respect its utility. Under the right tools, under steady hands, that heat allows us to shape entirely new adaptive models, ones that balance mission, margin, and market realities. Blueprint breakdown. The demographic contraction is accelerating. Past pipelines will fracture. Student-centered design isn't a tagline, it's the forge itself. Affordability must tie to perceived value and ROI, not just price cuts. Agile operational systems will separate those who melt from those who mold. The fire is lit. The hammers are ready. The craft is calling. Stop marketing to yesterday's students, casting new molds in the forge. Title: Stop Marketing to Yesterday's Students, A New Era for Higher Education. Publisher, Education Dynamics, Sarah Russell. In any forge, the mold is only as useful as its relevance to the material being poured. A cast meant for yesterday's ore won't shape the steel of today. Sarah Russell's piece for Education Dynamics is a bell ringer for this reality. The student search journey has reshaped. It's hardened and started to flow in entirely new directions. Where students once followed the heat trail of institutional prestige, they now lead with autonomy, scanning for cost clarity, cultural match, and career relevance. These modern learners aren't waiting for your polished brochures. They're forming opinions in seconds through AI-driven overviews, TikTok reels, and zero-click summaries. If your message isn't molten hot and hitting the mold as they scroll, it's cooling before it reaches their attention. Russell details how nearly 60% of education-related searches result in no clicks. That's not just signal erosion, that's signal redirection. AI engines are forging the impression, and institutions that fail to adapt will find themselves cut from consideration before the anvil ever strikes. This is where generative engine optimization, GEO, emerges not as a French tool, but as a strategic necessity. She also points the bellows towards content strategy, the real kind. Students aren't buying the institutional mythos anymore. They're buying evidence. They want videos, authenticity, stories from students and faculty, content that feels more like a day in the life than a sales pitch. Branding must now weld together trust, purpose, and visibility. All of this across fractured channels and fleeting attention spans. Most striking is her case for balancing brand and performance. The mistake many institutions make is trying to brute force short-term conversions without heating up long-term relevance. A forge without a bellows will burn out. The modern strategy must flow between short-game efficiency and long-game resonance, between yield this cycle and reputation for the next decade. This piece is not a how-to guide, it's a recalibration map, a reminder that adaptive marketing isn't about keeping up with trends, it's about reworking the furnace to match the fuel. Blueprint breakdown. Embrace GEO and zero-click strategy. Ensure your institution shows up in AI-driven summaries with relevance and clarity. This means structured data, strong reviews, and standout content. Prioritize short-form authentic videos. Scrap the glossy highlight reel, focus on 15 to 30-second bursts of student voice, lived experience, and unpolished truth. Audit and overhaul the website experience. UX, mobile performance, search visibility, and intuitive navigation must reflect how students browse, not how staff wish they did. Balancing branding with conversion strategy. Allocate space and budget for both upper funnel storytelling and lower funnel performance. One without the other is a half-built tool. Consolidate paid media for AI optimization. Ditch micro-targeting that chokes signal flow. Lean into audience insights, smart bidding, and creative assets that let machine learning do its work. This article sets the cornerstone for adaptive enrollment management. Marketing can no longer operate in isolation and tradition. It must be forged strategically, swiftly, and in full alignment with how the current students see their world. The Forge expands beyond domestic fires. Article: The Enrollment Shifts in Global Strategy, How U.S. Institutions Are Adapting in 2025, by KEG. Most blacksmiths focus on the forge in front of them, but some must learn to work under global heat. KEG's Enrollment Shifts in Global Strategy, How U.S. Institutions Are Adapting in 2025, forces enrollment leaders to widen their aperture. The pressures reshaping enrollment aren't just local. They're global, systemic, and intensifying. The demographic cliff is already cutting into the domestic market. KEG reinforces what we've all been seeing. Shrinking birth rates, particularly across the Midwest and Northeast, are compressing the pool of traditional-age domestic students. But unlike earlier cycles of enrollment management, this contraction is colliding with external forces: international competition, changing migration patterns, and rising geopolitical volatility, which amplifies the complexity. Where KEG offers real value is in highlighting how institutions are re-engineering their strategies at the structural level, rather than simply widening the funnel. Some campuses are pivoting hard into global recruitment, diversifying their student bodies by actively recruiting from growth regions like Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Africa. Others are aligning academic offerings toward market-relevant credentials that appeal to adult learners, international partnerships, and career-connected global programs. This is pure adaptive metallurgy. It requires leaders to assess where their institution forge sits in the broader market ecosystem, and to be willing to recast their value proposition for entirely new audiences. The domestic yield game is increasingly zero-sum. Global diversification offers new ore, but it demands craftsmanship in regulatory compliance, international student support, visa policy navigation, and market intelligence. KEG also point towards increasing institutional vulnerability to global volatility itself. Shifts in foreign policy, currency fluctuations, international safety perceptions, and visa processing timelines can reshape entire classes within a single cycle. That demands real-time modeling, scenario planning, and cross-border partnerships that go beyond marketing brochures. One area I would have liked to see KEG to press harder is the internal forge work required to sustain these strategies. You cannot simply bolt on global enrollment. Institutions must build internal cultural capacity. Faculty, staff, advising, and co-curricular systems must evolve to serve increasingly diverse student needs and expectations. Without this tempering, global strategies risk producing short-term enrollment spikes, but long-term attrition fractures. In the Forge Bellows sequence, this article belongs in the section where temperature rises sharply. As the domestic furnace cools, institutions must decide whether to let the metal harden into contraction or reheat by crafting globally resilient pipelines. Blueprint breakdown. Domestic contraction requires global diversification, but that doesn't come without deep institutional alignment. Global recruitment introduces new volatility. Scenario modeling becomes essential. Program portfolios must evolve toward market-relevant, globally attractive credentials. Internal cultural capacity must be forged alongside external recruitment strategies. The forge is no longer local. The metal now flows across borders. Only adaptive artisans will keep the bellows steady with transparency, outcomes, and alignment for their students. The Future of College Majors, Forging Academic Relevance in the Fire of Demand. Article: The Future of College Major, Reinvention or Extinction, by Greg Pillar. In every forge, some metal is worth preserving. Their alloys are too brittle to survive another heat cycle. Greg Pillar's The Future of College Majors, Reinvention or Extinction, throws this metaphor directly onto the academic anvil. Higher education has long struggled under the weight of portfolio bloat. Programs once designed for faculty interest or institutional prestige have often been kept alive far beyond their student demand or workplace relevance. As Pillar argues, these academic artifacts are now exacting a heavy cost. Diluted enrollment pipelines, unsustainable instructional loads, and financial strain on institutional resources. In the Innovation Forge, we refer to this as deadweight ore, occupying space in the furnace without yielding adaptive strength. Pillar is blunt. Stop resuscitating dead programs. Every unaligned major consumes bandwidth that could be reinvested into programs aligned with emerging workforce trends, regional economic needs, and student career aspirations. Labor market alignment is increasingly central to student decision-making. Institutions that cannot connect academic offerings directly to employer needs are seeing their competitive advantage erode. Yet, as Pillar wisely notes, this isn't simply about slashing low enrollment programs indiscriminately, which is not an uncommon trend if you look at the headlines. The craftsmanship lies in academic metallurgy, regularly evaluating program portfolios, aligning curriculum with evolving industries, forging stackable credentials, and ensuring pathways are adaptable as job markets shift. Where the article hits hardest is on institutional reluctance. Many campuses cling to legacy programs out of tradition, faculty resistance, or misplaced optimism that enrollment will rebound. But unexamined nostalgia is no longer a shield against enrollment decline. Adaptive enrollment management demands leaders with the courage to confront difficult truths about what their markets actually value. An interesting next step would be the operational link between enrollment modeling and program review. Academic portfolio management shouldn't exist in isolation. Predictive yield models, inquiry trends, and financial aid simulations must inform which programs deserve investment and which require consolidation or retirement. This is where the slate rights craft becomes most visible, connecting behavioral signals to curricular shaping. In the Forge Bellows sequence, this article belongs in the stage where the initial heating gives way to selective striking. Not all metal deserves to be hammered further. Some alloys must be melted down to fuel stronger, more relevant forms. Blueprint breakdown. Academic portfolio bloat drags enrollment pipelines towards unsustainability. Labor market alignment is now a primary enrollment driver. Courageous leadership is required to confront outdated program offerings. Program review and enrollment modeling must operate as a unified forge. The anvil is ready. The hammer must fall with precision. Relevance is not permanent. It must be reforged. Hammering stability in shifting fires. Article: How Higher Ed Institutions Survive Volatility by Changing Higher Ed. In any forge, heat is not the problem. Unmanaged heat is. In How Higher Ed Institutions Survive Volatility, Changing Higher Ed frames the central dilemma. Volatility isn't temporary noise. It's the new furnace enrollment leaders must work inside. Demographic cliffs, financial pressures, changing student expectations, and even political scrutiny continue to hammer institutional models. What makes this period unique is not any one pressure, but the convergence of many. Volatility has moved from cyclical to structural, and this article wisely identifies several forms of adaptive metallurgy emerging in response. Some institutions are turning to mergers and acquisitions, seeking scale efficiencies, and expanding program offerings. Others are broadening their view of the customer. Others are broadening their view of the customer, with parents and employers. In the Innovation Forge, we see this not as reactionary work, but as precision craftsmanship. Volatility exposes the brittleness of static strategy. Institutions cling to rigid enrollment pipelines, frozen curricula, and bloated cost structures are finding that their metal is shattering under the stress. Those who survive are those who temper, applying just enough heat, allowing for flex, and restriking where necessary. Volatility demands real-time visibility into student behavior, financial aid leverage points, inquiry pool health, and melt risk indicators, which I would love to see this article expand into. The slate rights craft lies in using these signals not just for forecasting, but for day-to-day operational adjustments in this new world of volatility. The Forge Bellows sequence, this article rounds out Chapter 1's ignition phase. The enrollment furnace is running hotter than ever. Survival now belongs to those who master not avoidance, but adaptive control of the flame. Blueprint breakdown. Volatility is structural, not temporary. Permanent flexibility is required. Mergers, partnerships, and cross-sector alliances offer scale and diversification. Adaptive systems turn volatility into actionable signals for enrollment strategy. The heat is not your enemy. The uncontrolled fire is. The masters of the forge learn to work inside of it. The metal has entered the fire. This opening chapter was never meant to solve. It was meant to sear, to press our attention into the conditions shaping the forge around us. Shrinking demographics, misaligned programs, outdated marketing, global disruption, and a volatility that isn't passing. It's permanent. These 5 entries aren't warnings, they're invitations. They invite us to let go of the comfort strategies, retire the brittle models, and confront the unignorable signals in our data and our student behavior. Adaptive enrollment management doesn't start with a calendar. It starts with a reckoning. What do we actually know about our markets, our capacity, our relevance, and how willing are we to strike new forms under changing heat? There is no returning to a cooler age. The question now is who will learn to work inside the furnace, who will shape systems that flex, messaging that resonates, programs that serve, and structures that endure. In the chapters ahead, we will begin that shaping. We'll craft strategic frameworks, build data pipelines, temper predictive models, and align teams around signal, meaning, and action. But it all begins with fire and the willingness to face it head on. The forge is lit. Keep the bellows moving. Chapter 2 awaits. If you enjoyed today's episode, please grow the guild by rating and reviewing the Innovation Forge podcast or sharing it with a colleague who needs to hear about these creative crossovers in education. The best review or comment every month will get an ebook of my book, of course. Particularly great ones will also be featured on future episodes. Thank you so much for joining me in the workshop today. Remember to strike true, and let's forge something extraordinary together.
I woke to sparks on parchment, dust in the air. Timelines walked the market bare. The map we followed, a relic in ash. The funnel fractured, the signals clash. Approaching the cliff, they used to say. But gravel gave way back yesterday. Names grew stale, the clicks grew cold. What once was silver now rusts with mold. The fire is lit, the air is thin. Hold both break while new forms begin. Student-centered, it's not a claim. It's the steel we quench, the truth in flame. The yield gods falter, the scripts decay. Trembling hand. Hold the heat, hold strike not from panic, but from pattern. Forge not from fear, but from flame.
The fire is lit, the bellows swell. We cast our hopes where pressure dwells. Missions melt or missions mold. What will you strike as the future unfolds?
This is not the first strike. It is the first hate. And the hammers are ready.